While the rest of the world is queuing up at Starbucks, clutching their mugs like a lifeline, and declaring they can't even function until they've had their first cup, there's a small, quiet group of people who just don't. They don't need the bean. They don't need the kick. And in a world that treats caffeine like a basic human right, these people are often looked at like they're missing a firmware update. But stay with me, because if you're one of those people who avoids the coffee pot, there is something fascinating happening in your nervous system that most people are too overstimulated to notice. Here's the truth. Not drinking coffee doesn't mean you lack energy. It doesn't mean you're less productive. It actually means your brain is calibrated to a completely different frequency. Let's start with the obvious question. Why is everyone else so obsessed? Society has turned coffee into a personality trait. It's the fuel for hustle culture. Biologically, caffeine is a master manipulator. It works by plugging your adenosine receptors, the ones that tell your brain you're tired. It doesn't actually give you energy, it just prevents your brain from knowing it's exhausted. It's a chemical mask. According to genetics, your indifference to coffee might be written in your DNA. People who don't drink coffee often fall into two psychological categories: the high baseline and the natural regulators. First, let's talk about the high baseline. Some people's brains are naturally more aroused in a psychological sense. Their nervous systems are already running at an optimal level of alertness. For them, adding caffeine is like putting jet fuel in a lawnmower. It doesn't make them faster, it just makes them shake. Research suggests that people with high trait anxiety or high sensory processing sensitivity often avoid coffee because their brains are already IMAX versions of reality. They don't need a chemical to help them notice the world, they're already seeing it in 8K. Then there are the natural regulators. These are the people who have a higher interoceptive awareness, a fancy way of saying they're deeply in tune with their body's internal signals. When they're tired, they listen. When they're hungry, they eat. They don't want to borrow energy from tomorrow to pay for today. Think about that. While the rest of the office is riding a dopamine spike at 10 a.m. only to crash and burn at 2 p.m., the non-drinker is playing the long game. Their energy levels are a flat, steady line. They've traded the high-intensity peaks for sustainable endurance. In a world obsessed with sprints, they are the marathon runners. But here's where it gets psychologically deep. There is a social, performative element of coffee. We use getting coffee as a shield for vulnerability. It's a reason to meet, a prop to hold during an awkward silence, a ritual that says, I am a busy, productive member of society. People who don't drink coffee are often more comfortable with the unbuffered version of social interaction. They don't need the ritual to feel on. And let's talk about that us versus them thinking. Have you noticed how coffee drinkers make it their entire identity? Don't talk to me until I've had my latte. It's a form of tribal signaling. By opting out, you're essentially saying, I don't need this external crutch to be myself. That requires a level of psychological independence that most people find intimidating. Now, I have to be honest here. For some, avoiding caffeine isn't just about genetics. It can be a protective measure. If you've experienced burnout or have an overactive fight-or-flight response, your brain might see caffeine as a threat. It associates that racing heart with panic, not productivity. If that's you, staying away from coffee isn't boring, it's an act of self-care. It's you protecting your peace from a world that wants you constantly activated. So what does this all mean? If you're the one person at the meeting drinking water while everyone else is on their third espresso, remember this: you aren't lazy, you aren't missing out. You're actually experiencing a version of reality that is rare. You're seeing the world through a lens that hasn't been chemically altered. You have a more stable self-concept. Your flow states are earned through focus, not induced by a drug. You're regulated by your own rhythms.